Hi, Crystal. I think it's probably easiest if I'm just kind of like looking at this Frank and Ruby example and just kind of talking about it. So let's just go back to your email here. So let's just start first with understanding the concepts of opportunity cost and gains from trade and trying to understand that difference. And just to do it, I'm just going to open up a blank. Um, just going to open up a blank slide. That way we can kind of write some things out here. Okay. So if we were to look at something like a PDF, a PPF, where we have two products, X and Y. So the idea is that when I'm just going to make this bowed out just to make it more realistic. The idea of the opportunity cost is that there is a trade off. So when you think when you see the word opportunity cost, I want you to think trade off. What is the sacrifice? In this case, to go from A to B represents an increase in the quantity of good X. And that we see right there. But it also represents a decrease in Y. And that is the trade off that we're measuring. We just want to know how many X do I gain compared to how many Y did I have to give up to gain that X. So that's the opportunity cost. And the idea that leads us to gains from trade is that you've got two different countries that have different opportunity costs. And I kind of made these a little bit stark, the difference a bit stark here. Here you can see that if these were the exact same amount, let's just assume that that's the case. Let's say these are both at 100 of good Y. The idea is that this is different. And yeah, the slope is changing right along the curve, but just on some level, you can see that country B's trade off or opportunity cost is different than country A's. For the most part, it's a 1-to-2 ratio. Here, it's a 1-to-4 ratio, meaning they give up 400 of the good that's on the x axis to get 100 of the good on the y axis. Whereas in country A, they give up 200 of the good on the x axis to gain 100 of the good on the y axis. That different trade off means that the countries should specialize where they're really good at something. And this gets us at least to the concept. All I want to explain at this point is the concept of what it means to have a gains from trade. The gains from trade means that if each of these two countries now trade for the goods, that they can now consume outside of their frontier. We just need to calculate it. What the gains from trade tries to capture, for instance, is that there's kind of like two possibilities here. If they had not traded, they'd be able to consume this, but because they did trade, they could consume this. And that difference is the gains from trade. Okay, so now let's look at Frank and Ruby. Frank and Ruby. Frank the farmer and Ruby the rancher. Okay. So now the difference here you can see is that they have straight line PPFs. It makes our job a little bit easier when we have a straight line PPF because now we can calculate a constant opportunity cost. So the steps to solve this would be is that over here, the trade-off would be 8M for 32P. Over here, it would be 24M for 48P. Now I'm just going to start to reduce this. And these are my opportunity costs. All I did to get the green was I then just said, what is 1P? What is the opportunity cost? So I just divided each side by 2, or here I divided each side by 4. Okay, now here's the question. Who has the lowest opportunity cost for meat? And then who has the lowest opportunity cost for potatoes? For meat, who makes meat the cheapest? Here, one meat costs 2P. Here, one meat costs 4P. So, Ruby makes meat the cheapest. Potatoes, who makes potatoes the cheapest? One potato costs half, one potato costs a fourth. So here, Frank makes potatoes the cheapest. Now, the next part to this would be is we need to have some terms of trade. Now, we're not given that in this example, but let's make something up. We know that 1M must trade between 2P and 4P, because if it didn't trade between 2P and 4P, then either person would just do it themselves. So let's just pick 3. Let's say that the terms of trade is 1M to 3P. So if that's the case, then Frank at the initial point is going to make only let's see here. He's going to make only sorry, I lost my train of thought. Frank's going to make only potatoes, so he's going to make 32 potatoes, and Ruby is going to make only meat, so 24 meat. And then they're going to trade for the other thing that they need. So let's just say they give up, I don't know, let's just say they give up 10 meats. So that would mean, let's see here, minus 10 meat, and Frank would get the 10 meat. And if they traded 10 meats, then they would get 30 potatoes. Oh shit, Frank's got very little left. Well, you get the idea. Um, because what it does, let's put it over here. What it does is it leaves, so going from here doing the math, it leaves Frank at a position where he's at 10 meat and 2 potatoes. And it leaves Ruby in a situation um, at 14 meat and 30 potatoes. So that would mean 10 meat, 10 meat and 2 potatoes. So if we had some math, if we actually had the numbers, we would know that that's right there, right? Because that's approximately where 2 would be, and that's approximately where 10 would be. And that for Ruby, it would be at 14 meat and 30 potatoes. So it's probably going to be right there. And the idea, so we can't really do the math here just with what we're provided, but we could, if we had the points here, we could talk about for 14, how many potatoes was this? And the idea that this is 30. And that here, 2 potatoes, we're doing a difference now of this to this. So that's our gains from trade. Calculating that difference and calculating that difference. We just don't have enough data to do that. Okay.